Thank you for joining me, Chuck Morse, here at the Morse Force. I knew that the question of global warming and climate change, which is a term that was developed actually in the 2000s, because global warming was not specific enough. It didn't appear to be happening as planned. I knew that this was a political issue as opposed to a scientific issue when early on I saw liberals that I knew getting in my face if I questioned the orthodoxy of global warming, and this shrill and hysterical attack on anybody who disagreed with it. So I want to talk more about the politics of global warming as opposed to the science. And I think that as far as the science is concerned, just briefly, I think that most people can agree, and most nations can agree, that air pollution is a bad thing, and that is the main cause, if there is global warming, of global warming. So the idea of addressing air pollution by reducing carbon emissions is not something that's controversial. It's something that's supported by, intelligent, well-meaning people all over the world, and that I would argue that the best approach to that would be to let science and let technology and the free market and develop a means to reduce carbon emissions through alternative energy, through sequestration, through underground storage. There's a lot of technologies around that could be brought to bear. But why is it that the left has taken an issue that is otherwise a legitimate issue and perverted it with their political agendas? They obviously don't care about global warming because, as proof being the Rio Accords back in the 90s and Agenda 21, which does nothing to actually address the issue of air pollution. What it does is it simply allows for more socialism. It allows to transfer the wealth of the successful societies like the United States to the poorer societies, who are then allowed to continue to pollute, if anything, to increase their levels of pollution. So, the scam is there. It's nothing to do with, their virtue with regard to, protecting the atmosphere or protecting the environment. Um, so it brings up the question of why is it that the issue is so political? Why is it that they are so frenzied over this idea um, from a political standpoint? And I would say that it goes back to the sort of the darker side of the European Enlightenment, the darker side of Whiggish England back in the 16th, 17th century, 18th century, when you had this movement toward control of the environment and control of the world through science. The father of science, the father of modern science, is generally viewed as Sir Isaac Newton, who was, by the way, a theist. He believed in God, and he was, considered himself to be Christian. But his views and his ideas were embraced by the more radical elements of the Enlightenment, who were materialistic, atheistic, pantheistic, and that they believed that they worshiped the earth and that they viewed God and the earth as the same thing. A lot of those ideas came from Baruch Spinoza in Holland, who was a kind of a anti-Jewish radical, and that these ideas took hold in this perverse and shrill belief that the entire world, the scientific material world, could be and should be completely controlled and regulated by man, and that nature could be conquered and taken over, that science could subdue the natural forces of the universe, and that they could do this by firstly overthrowing God in heaven and going to an entirely hermetically sealed scientific universe. Now, the ideas are completely consistent with the so-called progressive movements of the 19th century, including Marxism and other movements. There was a lot of figures in that time that I could point to, in that they translated and they transferred this idea of control of the planet and control of the environment to control of the human being, control of human societies by an elite, who would also ultimately control God, and decide what God is and what God says, and essentially reach up into the heavens, grab God by the neck, and bring him down to earth, and make him a slave of them. So you have this idea of controlling the world through science. And again, I think that it was a perversion of Isaac Newton's theories, because Isaac Newton did not intend this. But this is how it happened. These ideas went into the perverse cauldron of the perfectibilists, the left, who wanted to perfect the planet and perfect human nature by force of arms and subversion. Ultimately, eventually, these doctrines in the early 19th century were refuted by some of the very scones of that Enlightenment. I would particularly point to Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein. Frankenstein was a warning to the world that this Enlightenment, this scientific Enlightenment, which thought that they could create individuals, human beings, by reconstructing them, dead bodies, and putting life into them through electrical currents, that this was evil and that this would result in horrendous, catastrophic consequences for humanity. And that book continues to hold great sway. It was, in a sense, the first book in the horror genre, because it was a horror, and because it is the basic of every horror movie, every horror book, every horror work of art that has emanated ever since. This idea that man's desire to physically control the universe and control human societies is and will backfire, because it's not natural, because it doesn't reconcile not only with reality in the world, which is that we cannot control nature to a certain degree. We can regulate certain aspects to improve life, but ultimately we can't control nature, and more fundamentally, we cannot overthrow God in heaven. Get a haircut? Thanks a lot. Somebody's throwing insults at me. So be it. Okay, people have to make it personal. I'm sorry about that. But look, I can't control nature, okay? I can do a little bit, but as you get older, you start to look a little funky. What can I do? Anyway, so getting back to the issue of global warming, or as they call it now, climate change, um, it's a legitimate fact that we ought to try to develop the proper sciences and technologies through the free market to reduce air pollution. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. But this concept that the weather is affected by man-made entities or objects or pollution or whatnot, that's something that is not known. And even if it were true, it feeds into this political philosophy that believes that man can control the world. And they seek to hold the levers of power so that they are the ones who are doing the controlling. And we should reject it for that reason. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. I am really working to go live every day now at 12 noon, whether I do it with phone calls from my laptop or whether I do it like I'm doing right now from my car because I'm out working. That's my goal. So thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.